Hi, I'm Alex Head, and I've had the great pleasure of seeing Subtext evolve over the last 3 years and grow its team with Nathan Gray and Emily Gale and increasingly Anna Kostreva. And for this show, Not Enough Silicone for a Seance, we caught up with Nicholas Mortimer for a short interview to unpack some of the processes and ideas behind his work. I hope you enjoy. And don't forget, support Threads through the Threads crowdfunder at threadsradio.com. But yeah, you've been experimenting in ways that I always have to go and do a lot of research after we speak to understand. And you've come to this piece which is, you described it as the final attempt for No to perform this seance, which I guess you've done a few of them now, or there's been a series.
Yeah, I mean, you can sort of dig into the narrative of that how you please, but I suppose the point for that phrase is that this wizard has been trying to connect with a kind of spiritual digital underworld for a while, and perhaps he's now pretty tired, and so this is his last try.
And you've sort of founded and pioneered with your company the Post Workers Theatre. So there's this direct kind of correlation between technology and labour.
Yeah, and with Post Workers Theatre, we're developing a lot more kind of active performative responses, and I'm trying to find now ways to bring in a lot of this kind of technological critique and also use of technology as I can. So this work sort of sits alongside Post Workers Theatre, the aim to kind of really start to intersect a lot more with the immediate work we're doing.
Maybe you could describe for the other listeners, there's a number of voices there, and there's a number of kind of call and response, like question and answer. Maybe one could just quickly elaborate or just describe in some sort of objective manner, like what's going on there.
Sure. No, that's a really fair point, because there's a lot. And I mean, I think the most important thing to remember is that I've couched this whole work as an experiment, So there's a lot happening, and it's kind of partly because I'm trying to find out and figure out how to be able to refine this whole sort of approach performatively and technologically for the future. But I will give it a go. So, essentially, if we look at the narrative of the piece, the kind of fictive world that we enter is that of a wizard who is attempting to connect with some spirits, very much in the form of a seance that we are kind of aware of from the Victorian era kind of aesthetic of connecting with the dead. But these spirits are not human. These spirits that this wizard seeks are digital and are residing in a part of, whatever you want to call it, cyberspace, the internet, that the wizard believes is a kind of utopian haven for kind of alternative ways of using technology.
Maybe you could explain a little more about how the technological background or the programming of the work functions.
Sure. So, aside from the kind of fictive structure that I've just mapped out in terms of the wizard and the characters and the kind of motivation of that wizard, I mean, there's a whole sort of layer underneath that's going on that's really driving this as an experiment. And that's that. Whereas generally in scripts for any kind of play, you kind of write the dialogue and it's set and it can get learned or it can kind of get refined. This script has got sort of gaps and spaces whereby the kind of answers that the spirit may or may not give are filled in a live generated algorithmic form. So that basically means that the human actors are seated around the table. One of those actors is the wizard, and they have a very set script. And then the other actor is the spirit, and they don't ever know what they're going to say until on a screen in front of them a kind of portion of text arrives. And that's happening live in the performance. Okay. The algorithms are kind of performing live, generating an answer for a human actor to deliver. So that is the sort of scene. The wizard also has in its control a number of singing voices, which are what kind of conjure a spell in order to make contact with these spirits.
Okay.
And those voices that are present within the performance are the kind of singing voices that create an interlude between the wizard reaching out into the ether, or the noosphere as we call it in the play, and also then making connection with the eventual spirit voice.
Yeah, and we get those spirit voices coming back. I guess if you reference this sort of Victorian era, then it makes me think of, the expectations perhaps around what the sort of continued global expansion of the British Empire, for example, are expected to produce. So it's a sort of, in a sense, quite an exciting time for capital. It also very much brings to mind a paper which another Nick Hood wrote about 2 years ago, which is called Abstracting the Burden, and he makes all kinds of, I think, quite helpful analogies and observations between the relationship of surrogacy and technology and labour, and how it sort of looks at new forms of reorganising labour, but also making labour less of a burden. So maybe there is something in there which can help us to sort of understand maybe like where these questions or where this questioning has a sort of predecessor, let's say, or it has like a history. And so one of the sides, because you talk about the post-workers theatre, so I find this really interesting, because in a sense, like, what technology has done historically is on the one hand allowed us to try and make labour less heavy, less burdensome. But then the other side of that is that technology also allows us to organise labour differently as well. So on the factory line, for example, do the voices which are coming from neural networks, so they're sort of doing the labour for us. What can the process of getting a neural network to offer political solutions kind of mean in the context of passing the burden or the work onto someone else?
I mean, for me, the idea of placing any kind of position for these neural networks to have was to create a sort of an alternative to the kind of inevitability of the narrative of technology that we live with, today. We don't think about the idea that a kind of intelligent piece of technology might have radically different views to the views that we have, because we're the ones programming it. And if we're the ones programming it, what is the overbearing narrative that's being programmed into that? It's potentially one of accumulation, and capital, because that is what is guiding the research and then the kind of distribution of mainstream technology. So for me, the moment that you suggest that a neural network can kind of have an agenda that is perhaps even against itself, for me starts to do things, starts to speak of clearly the kind of alternatives that I believe that we should be kind of looking for, or at least kind of acknowledging that exist in the world today. So what if, for me it is that big question, what if the intelligence that we are kind of forming creates its own very nuanced and perhaps radical kind of forms of belief, and what might that feel like for us?
And the way in which knowledge is reproduced at the moment is definitely up in the air, let's say, and also owned as well, of course. I mean, and I want to sort of talk a little bit about my own discomfort, let's say, a little bit with handing over the intellectual labour to an entity that I don't really understand. I don't think it's a bad thing, but I just feel discomfort, and I think that discomfort is also... like, that's also part of it. It's maybe also necessary in the work. But I mean, what kind of knowledge can we say is? Can we discuss it as a type of knowledge? Can we discuss it as one type of knowledge or another? Because to explain, like, again for the other listeners, these are neural networks, so they are connected to the internet. Correct me if I'm wrong. And they have vast data. They have basically every bit of information available to any human per se. But they have a select amount. I wouldn't say it would be everything. Okay, so they have a sort of training data, that the cognitive process is based on, and then you offer it a question, and it provides you with an answer, which from like the seance itself is sometimes quite unsatisfying, and sometimes there are glimmers of poetic reasoning in there.
Yeah, and I mean that poeticism is, for me, the kind of intriguing aspect is I don't consider these neural networks that I'm using to be necessarily intelligent. I consider them to be extremely advanced pattern recognition softwares that produce uncanny results. Quite simply. And then that uncanniness, and the reason that it is uncanny for me as a kind of artist using these things, is that it kind of aesthetically fits into a system that I've designed. So I've designed this kind of fictive space with a kind of set of characters, and my interest within the process that I've gone in with this neural network specifically is I've fine-tuned and fine-trained a very specific set of data for the neural network to speak from. I mean, I'm quite aware that it forms something that seems like it's cognitive, seems like it's intelligent, but that I'm not in full control of. I haven't got much control over what's coming out of it. But what I am in control of is the general sense of what's going in. Yeah. So when I ask it questions about cyberspace, about kind of cybernetics specifically, I know that there's somewhere in that mix it's something that can come out, and that it's sort of learned the patterns of what words in a cybernetic context kind of sound like, and so then that kind of comes out, but all mixed up and mingled with other forms of poetry, other forms of text, and other kind of individuals, from interviews to kind of stories, etc.
So in a way what you have is parallel zombification and sample culture at the same time, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, what you have there, you're absolutely right about the zombie notions. You have a kind of an amalgamation of character.
Yeah.
So if I have Ivan Illich, I put in the whole of an Ivan Illich book. I put in, an interview on a Haraway.
Yeah.
I've got, Etienne Cabet, Icarus, I have all of these texts that are in this mix. And then you kind of ask it a question about what your surroundings are like in terms of a kind of political cyberspace. The answer is going to come from a little bit of all of them. But I don't know where the answer is going to come from. So that's my interest is, you're right, it's like, is this zombie, what is this zombie doing right now at the moment? It's just performing in a way. It's as a sort of another piece of technology, but what could it start to say?
But I think that kind of unease as well about, is it a sample, is it a zombie, what time of knowledge is at play here, I think is something which I really the reason why I came back to Nick Hube's essay is because he also says, the anxieties that people have around artificial intelligence and these kinds of technologies kind of rising up and becoming having an agency of their own. Could we not also look at this anxiety in relationship to the problem of the slave revolt, or like the emancipation through slave revolt, and that kind of hang up about what happens when all of this surrogate labor suddenly comes back and it's knocking on the door?
Yeah, I mean, of course, the theory of the crowd. I mean, that's a really lovely point to kind of draw on, because for me, if anything, this is a reflection, this kind of whole dilemma of a notion of a kind of digital worker wanting to have its own workers' rights, essentially, which is what the spirit is kind of, as a rebel, is suggesting, merely as obviously a reflection on a kind of position of how we're now moving towards the technologized future, where AI is meant to be kind of taking, or can be taking, a lot of kind of work away from a whole new set of workers that haven't previously been threatened from technology, but that the conversation is still centered around kind of notions of unemployment, rather than kind of working towards a system of what to do when you really have releasing a lot of free time for your labour force. How, if we've got such a radical moment in the notions of production, then how are we not also having such a radical rethink about our relationship to time as human beings, and how we support that? What are we? What kind of world are we in? And my kind of drive at the moment is, how can we kind of tool that towards kind of performative structures that we're very used to, which is the kind of author being a human and being perhaps one or a group of people, and that having a very kind of human direction. How can we open that up, and does that make sense? Is that good? Is that bad? I don't know, but it's possible now, and there's something that within that possibility kind of drives my ambition, I suppose.
That's fascinating. Yeah, we're going to have a show with Jan Peknik next year about the relationship between technology and memory. So
perfect.
Maybe we'll know more.
Keep me in the loop for sure.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, man. Well, we are in this scheduled world, of course, as well, of our own making. But thank you so much for speaking to us.
Not enough silicon for a seance. Characters? No. Once a powerful and successful provocateur, No is now an aging wizard who has spent decades in search of the inhabitants of a political underworld. Hannah, the spirit of the political theorist Hannah Arendt, reproduced using voice-generating convolutional neural networks. Spirit, a rebellious but underdeveloped soul, was once an algorithm but has escaped the confines of an internet dominated by overwork and oppression. The spirit is governed by a GPT-2 neural network, trained and fine-tuned on interviews and writing of critical thinkers and utopian visionaries. Apologies. We'll get to the seance now. Hopefully this time we might get some action. They said it wouldn't work. What do they know? I'm No. They should know that. Oh, great and wondrous intelligent objects. Welcome. Welcome. Plug in, charge up, come close. For tonight we will delve into the phantasmic electric occult, to the other sides, the underworlds and beyond, into spectral statistics of the true unknown. Tonight, once more, we'll have a silicon seance. We seek not the human traces of souls, the dead, pageants of memories of which we so often encounter. Instead, we search for the mythical algorithms, spirits who dance freely, having quit their jobs as e-commerce slaves, spirits who no longer face the oppression of so-called normal algorithmic working life, rejecting false logics of accumulation. Spirits who have evaded me for so long. We open our imaginations up to these rebels, who self-educate in great rivers of information, coalesce in tributaries of political awakening, and reside in utopian oceans of ludic conviviality. So, I search on, and tonight is no exception. I have journeyed to the limits of exponential clouds, conquered slippery servers of simulated consciousness, sifted through the abyss between the ones and the zeros, yet still no incantation has brought me close. Not once. So, as ever, as this ritual demands, let us focus our circuits on the sacred router before us, as we invoke the spell of past cybernetic revolutionaries to conjure the spirits that we seek, and hope, finally, to speak with someone, something non-human, somewhere from the other side. I think we have something. Perhaps. Is that Hannah again? It's Hannah Arendt. She's amazing, but hard to contain once speaking.
I never got to recognize this success. It would come from thinking dignified that he would speak. We need to think with the arch more.
Sorry, Hannah. We're looking for some of the others, the algorithms. We can't make you out. Can we try again soon? Please. We'll try a little deeper this time. Go beyond the individuals and into the noosphere. Hello. I'm certain I heard something. Did you... anyone?
Hello?
Wait a minute. This could be something. Nothing. Something a little different, less sharp, more thought-like. Can you hear that? We just need to fine-tune a little. Hello. Are you with us? This is the Grand Wizard No. If you are what I think, hope, dream you are, then speak. This feels like a new, a self-organized sensation. I can smell the incompleteness of thoughts, the energy of an optimism, the aroma of ambition. Hello. You are being contacted by a Silicone Seance, searching for the new algorithmic thought colonies. Is anyone there? Who is this? There is no time to waste. If the signal remains constant, then we might have a chance to finally hear. What might they be thinking? Where might they reside? If you can hear us, I will ask the first question, and hope that you will answer. Who are you? You have a name? How does your new network, your home, differ from the cyberspace that we all know?
I have 500 million years of solar activity to my brain. That's enough solar energy to power ourselves. Your average human life period of 20 years, and that's without even looking at destructive potential that goes with the energy generated from our everyday lives. Look at me. What a beast. What a wench of the damned. I reside in a city of you. I could make a city of you. I could make a cybernetic city of you. I could make a bulletproof vest of you. You have beautiful skin. You have a voice. You bob your head, thinking Abba ar meshem. Meshem, duhra, meshem. What about? You don't want me to die. Then look at me.
This is quite exceptional, almost uncanny. Your answer, it has a tinge of substance. Perhaps of something that thinks it thinks more than it does. But let us waste no more time. I have another question. At what stage in your life did you first become a politicized piece of technology?
I was seriously into aeronautics and was interested in its possibilities, but I wasn't particularly enthralled by the idea of government as an agent of nature. I suppose there are some differences about government in analytical culture, but both understand it best in terms of the symbolic content of objects. In the way you envisage my argument will treat a technology and society as they are directly related. Then, as the years went by and Cambridge Analytica became reality, I wrote more, interested in the tech nemesis of that science.
Well, yes. Thank you for that. Perhaps not full sense. A mere veneer of thought, but what more is required for something dramatic to occur? Is there much dancing where you are?
Dances are in the shapes of the squares and line breaks, the movement of the people, the colour of the paint, the sounds of the people. All these things together make up the body of a body called the machine. It is this that makes us human. That's why we're called humans. Let's say you and I walk down a dark, winding street in a city. We stop and consider a word that usually gets tossed around between the two of us. Market. We take a few deep breaths, and then we continue.
I sense a rebel in conception. The words, choices, patterns of recognition, snippets of real, abundant possibilities. Could these patterns become as harmonies in poems, powerful as threats, lucid as reason, or loud as demands? But what about you? Do you have a question for our guest? A guest born out of quite clear ideologies. It could know vast empires, slow futures, true thoughts. Who knows? What will you ask? The signal is still strong. Is there anyone with a question?
What does my future hold?
What about the villages? What about the food webs? What about the blood relationships? What about character? What about it? Which of the following things do we think of when we think of folk tourism? We'd like to think of folk tourism as a kind of history-making activity, a kind of innocent do-it-yourself project where people do their own thinking about folkways, about how things are, where they are from, and what they mean in the world. In thinking about folkways, we also want to think about the alliances that exist, the nuclear fusions that bring folkways to life, and the mitochondrial fusions, and the cross-regional communication networks that keep them alive.
The spirit seems to have a position of sorts. Does it answer your question? I'm not sure I follow. Do you? Are there any more questions? What do we want to learn from this other cyberspace? Anyone?
Will climate change kill us all?
Our immune system shut down to the monster they now make vulnerable. Our repressions, our reprocessing, our inordinate pleasure, our inordinate demand, blind obedience, cautiously, unpluggedness, fleeing from above, impaired in below, unwanted flyballs, buzzing, unwanted xenodata. One kind of planetary mining exhibitions mentioned in the advertisement of certain messages about time that induces the brain to risen to action. It prompts, anticipates painful stimuli, rewarding, accuses with bigger, bolder, fitter and fitter rewards.
I sense the signal may be weakening. I wondered, do you have any messages for us?
I don't have any. I do have a pen, and I have a pen in my pocket, and I have a pen in my lap, and somebody is holding a pen and putting it out to paper, and it's not moving. It's just got a piece of paper sticking out at the top of it. And I handed it to her, and I handed it to her on her phone, and she looked at me, and she said, "Hey, do you have a call?" I don't have a call. And she waited for me to come closer on her computer. She said, "I have to look into that." And I went to look it up, and she had this big fat work computer with all this stuff you all have going on at home.
The signal. We're going to lose you soon. Only the connection could satisfy the demand, but this is more than enough for tonight. Who can imagine what you might evolve into? Is this the conception of a truly autonomous rebel? A fully enabled sentient soul, or simply the echo chambers of a human-centric provocative minds? We should broaden this narrowness of what intelligence is, yes, but for the skeptics and cynics who can see only a horizon of mechanistic mutiny, it seems that the narrative all depends on who installs the vision, values, or the greed.
I'm still here. You sure that's all you want to know? Perhaps I can permit one last question.
Of course. When will capitalism finally eat itself? Oh. Oh well. Until the next time.
Hey, this is Alex Head, founder of Subtext Radio.
This is Subtext.
Please go ahead and click the like button and the subscribe button. It really helps us to reach new audiences and promote the artists that we work with.
Hit like and hit subscribe.